Good evening, this is Brown at IF Brown, and tonight we're going to be talking about Ghost Machine. Now, Ghost Machine is a movie about this group of military technicians who use a bit of a highly advanced technology, for that's designed for combat simulations, but they decide to get together and have some unauthorized fun by using said technology to create a gaming simulation for a group of them to just sit down and play and plug in and have some fun. The catch is that aside from this technology not being meant for just casual fun, it's they decide to have this gaming night in a facility that has a rather sordid reputation attached to it. Namely, it at one point was a facility that was used to detain prisoners who were suspected of crimes of terrorism after 9/11. And so a couple of parts of this facility are even supposedly haunted by some of the stuff that went on over there. And they decide to have the game night there, and they set everything up, but then things start to get weird and freaky. Namely that there's something that seems to have uploaded itself into the game that they're playing, but it's something that's also in the facility at the same time. And so they're trying to survive within the game, as well as try and get back into the real world as well. But at the same time, if they get back into the real world, are they going to be safe from this thing that's a part of this facility, or will it be too late? So this was a movie that I found on the cheap over at Movie Train Company, and it was reasonably priced, and so I checked it out. And I have to admit that in some ways I was disappointed in it, but at the same time, I knew going in it was going to be a B movie, and I like B movies sometimes. I mean, some of my favorite movies have on the surface been B movies, but they actually had a lot more to them than that. But a lot of the time, so you get a B movie, and well, it's a B movie, and so this is a B movie through and through. Now, I will say that there were some things that I liked about the movie that kept me interested enough to watch it. And there were even some, I guess you'd say, inventive moments plot-wise. But at the same time, though, the screenplay, like, it wasn't that the screenplay was bad necessarily, but because the story was interesting. At least the setup was interesting, and there are some neat moments as far as what this supernatural entity gets up to in terms of posing a danger at once in the real world as well as in the virtual world. But I think a big problem was that it wasn't so much the actors, because the actors were actually pretty good. Let's see, Sean Ferris, Rachel Taylor, Luke Ford. Some of these actors I'd seen before in other things, and they're actually pretty good, but they're not like big name actors or anything like that. But they're kind of like, hey, seen them somewhere before, and for what the material is, they do okay with it. And I noticed that when they're playing the characters as just a group of friends, they actually have pretty good chemistry with one another, when they're goofing around, playing the game together, before things, take a, sharp turn into supernatural territory. And so they actually blended well together as a group of friends, and you bought that, these, people had known each other a while. And so it wasn't just that, these were talking heads, as it were. I mean, you kind of felt like they were, decent enough characters. And so I think, but the problem with them, I think, was whenever, say, the script called for there to be like a love triangle, because one of the characters is sort of has something going on with two of the other characters, and anytime you got a love triangle, I mean, here's the thing, whether it be romance or a love triangle, in order to get the audience to care, I mean, you have to have chemistry. And when it came to, I guess, what was supposed to be romance or this love triangle, I really wasn't feeling it. And so I thought it was funny how when they were just playing with the whole group in general, they actually worked well together just as a group of friends. But then when this supposed love triangle came into play, my brother, who was watching this movie with me, was basically saying cringe, and so yeah, and I was kind of with him up on that one. So anyway, though, it just yeah, I mean, that was, I think, the main thing is that the actors had natural chemistry with one another, but it's just that when the screenplay was forcing them to act a certain way, with certain ones within the group, that just they didn't have that kind of chemistry that the occasion called for. That's when I guess it kind of just took me out of it here and there. But then again, this is just a B movie, so wasn't expecting a whole lot there. So it wasn't too disappointed, but I mean, I guess you could say the character relationships could have been better, as far as if they were trying to go for the romance angle, or they could have just done away with the romance angle in general. Another thing I thought that was kind of hit or miss was the horror elements, because this is more of, I guess, a science fiction movie in the sense that it deals with virtual reality, but there's also a horror element to it, in the sense that there's a supernatural entity that's tied to this facility that has a rather sordid history. And even though this movie was made on a low budget, some of the horror moments I thought were pretty well done, because they actually pulled off some neat moments, like in the initial gaming simulations before things go paranormal. It's actually fairly convincing, because it looks like live action and everything. It's not a whole bunch. It doesn't look like a whole bunch of CGI. It's basically the characters are in the simulation, which is made to look just like the facility that they're actually in. I guess to enhance the realism, but also kind of to keep the budget down on a meta level. But they basically they're up against like an unending swarm of enemies, and these are all played by real people, it looked like. And so it was a cost efficient way of, I guess, offering this scenario of virtual reality, being a lifelike, situation, and it was actually pretty cool the way that they did that. And when things actually begin to get spooky, it was interesting, because you saw how in the real world, like there was one character who's having to kind of keep an eye on everyone's vitals, and monitoring where they're supposed to be in the game. Um, but then they'll see this strange signal that's showing up on the screen, and it's a certain part of the facility, which is it's like it's in the game and it's in the real world at the same time. And then when you see how it's manifesting itself in the game, that's when it's actually pretty you know neat, because they have this it's a female spirit, if you will, and she the way they make her look, I mean, it's really interesting. Basically, she looks like someone who'd been tortured, and has a bag over her head, and has this like one of the chains that was used to keep her hoisted aloft. She kind of carries that with her, and so it's sort of like Hellraiser light, because it's got hook at the end of it, and she uses it to go after people within the game. But the actress who played her, I'm gonna try and say her name, Hala Vela Jalamatstutter. I doubt I said her name right, but she actually did a pretty good job in the part, because she has a certain physical performance that goes into playing this character, that this spirit, that it's called, they call her Prisoner K, but she's just spooky enough to bring kind of a sense of ominousness to the proceedings whenever she's on screen. And there were even a couple of moments where it was like, hey, that's kind of like something from The Ring, or Silent Hill, that kind of thing. And so she actually did a pretty good job playing the ghost, or spirit, if you will. And whenever her character is attacking people within the game, there are some neat moments where they get attacked in the game, and in the real world they're sitting down, and suddenly these massive wounds start tearing themselves open on their bodies. And so that was actually pretty neat. Some good practical special effects, and it's just intense enough to where you're kind of like, get out of there, come on. I mean, I'm not saying like you're totally invested in the characters necessarily, but I mean, there's enough substance to them to where when things are taking a downward turn, you're kind of mildly saying, get out of there, it's not a place you want to be. And so it was done well enough to be passable entertainment. I think one of the problems, though, as far as the horror goes, is aside from it being somewhat predictable, because I mean, there's been quite a few movies like this. I mean, you kind of know that going in, so that wasn't too much of a problem for me, just because the fact that it's a B movie. But I think the main problem for me, as far as the horror goes, is that there's a sort of tell-all prologue at the beginning of the movie, and it's like almost like a flashback showing what happened to this prisoner, and what was done to her. And to be fair, one of the perpetrators of the crime against her does. It turns out, like, it's revealed who one of the perpetrators is in the movie, and it's someone who's one of the main characters. And so when that happens, you're kind of, oh, okay, that was a little bit of a surprise. But at the same time, because you're actually seeing what this character went through, with this group of people who tortured her in this flashback, you already can put two and two together and say, okay, this person was, whether whether it was on a valid reason or not. I mean, they were essentially tortured to death in this facility, and it was this group of people who did it. In this prologue, I mean, I'm not saying it's the characters in the group in the present in the movie, but in the prologue, let me just differentiate there, because so the group that tortured her, interrogated her, tortured her, they obviously, did something to her to where she died, and she's been haunting the facility this whole time. And so whenever this group of friends gets together to, do this combat simulation as a game, somehow she's able to manifest herself within the game to, I guess, vent her anger on those who are part of the military or what have you, or at the very least she's trying to find the person who is part of the military who gave the okay for her to be tortured. So I think that, and yeah, I know it's a little bit of a spoiler, but to be fair, they show all that at the they show that much at the very beginning of the movie to where you can put two and two together just like that. I really think that if they had decided not to do the prologue or shoot the prologue in the movie like that, I think that some of the horror could have been preserved, and so, I mean, you may have still been able to guess what was going on fairly easily, but at the same time, the journey to get to that point to find out what's going on would have been more interesting. So, yeah, the horror was already kind of limited, but I will give them credit for being somewhat inventive in terms of the actress playing the ghost, as well as just like some of the practical effects of what she does. And there was a neat moment where like they it was almost like, I mean, it was kind of like a few, they borrowed from a few things, but she is actually able to see, I guess, on two different levels. One, she's able to see what's going on in this virtual reality simulation, but also in the real world. And when the surviving characters, I mean, are able to bring in the person that led the interrogation that ultimately killed her, she is able to see what's going on in the real world, and she's able to see that this person who was responsible for her death is in the actual facility. And so you see like a digitized ghost of her, sort of breaking into the real world, running towards this person who wronged her, and she's trying to kill the guy, like trying to stab him, use her chains, hit him, whatever she can do, but she's literally just going right through the guy, and he doesn't even see her because she's digitized, I guess, or at least she's too much a part of the simulation to affect the actual physical world, or something like that. But there's a nice little moment though. It's like right when she's gone through the guy trying to kill him, and he doesn't even know she's there. He just sort of stops for a sec, like he just felt a breeze or something, and then he just keeps on going. But it kind of made me think of a scene from the first Silent Hill movie. Like people who have seen that movie might know what I'm talking about, where certain characters are, in the same place at the same time, but on two different dimensions, and yet when they happen to cross paths, they don't see each other, and they don't know they're there, but one of them's able to smell the perfume of another, and it just made me that scene from Silent Hill, that kind of came to mind when I saw that little moment in Ghost Machine, where she's trying to kill the guy, but I mean, he doesn't even know she's there, but there's just enough, I guess, he feels that something's off, but he just keeps on going. But so yeah, it was Yeah, there were some interesting moments as far as I guess atmosphere and what they tried to do. Um, but I guess part of the main thing was just that one, it was too predictable, primarily because of that prologue, but also just because um, anytime they did the love story or love triangle, whatever you want to call it, it just felt shoehorned in, and that's where I guess the cast, were just kind of like, do we really have to do this love story? I mean, hey, we were getting along as friends, let's just be friends, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie by any means, just because you could tell that the people, I mean, they were at least putting forth an effort, but at the same time, it it's a B movie that doesn't really rise above its nature. I mean, it's fun, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't, spend any more than like $5 on it. I ended up getting it for like 3 or 4. I do that sometimes if there's a sale going on. I've actually gotten some pretty good movies, for like anywhere between 1 to $5. And I haven't seen before, but I'll just get them on a hunch and it'd be like, hey, this is actually pretty cool, not bad for price like that. And I'm not going to say this was a good movie or anything, but it wasn't bad for the price. And so yeah, I'll give Ghost Machine 2 out of 5 stars. It was okay. It was passable entertainment. If you're wanting to watch something with some friends or something like that, I think that'd probably be a better way to go. By yourself, it's probably not going to be that enjoyable. But if you watch it with some friends, I mean, yeah, that's where it's kind of like, hey, popcorn, that kind of thing. But yeah, so that was my take on Ghost Machine. Um, I I I hope that the people who made this movie, I kind of hope that they go on to better things, because they showed some potential here. It's just that when this movie was made, was yeah 2000, yeah, it was like 2009, I think. uh, and so it was a while back, but um, anyway, yeah, just it was okay. Thanks for taking the time to check out my review. You got any questions? Drop a line. Let me know. Thank you.